Happy to be here with you. My name is Marc Garcia, and as Susan said, I am running for the Pflugerville ISD School Board, place number 1. I'm running as a Democrat, and a nonpartisan. I'm a Democrat at heart, through and through. I'm also a father, and I'm a current educator. And I'm running because I really want to bring a unique voice to the Pflugerville board. I've got two kiddos, 2 small kids in elementary. And so during this pandemic, right, I understand what all of our parents have been faced with, what they've gone through, their challenges. I understand what it was like to really have to balance career and have to balance virtual learning, right? And still meet the needs of our kids, because I went through it right along with all the other parents. And as an educator, I'm currently a counselor in Austin ISD, right? And so I understood the anxieties that a lot of our teachers faced every day as they were showing up and educating our kiddos, still doing it with a smile, but inside just facing the unknowns and the anxieties. And so their stories, the stories of our teachers, and the stories of our families, those are my stories too. I lived exactly as they did. And so that kind of catapulted me into this race, because oftentimes I think those are the voices that are missing on our school boards. Sometimes we have retirees on our school boards, and that's wonderful. But as somebody who's living through what our teachers are living through, what our parents are living through right now, especially as we navigate the tail end of the pandemic, hopefully, I really think that our boards need people who understands what it takes to run a school successfully. In my educational career, I've also been a teacher before I became a counselor. I've also been an administrator. And so I have the knowledge that it takes to balance budgets, to make those choices to ensure that our schools are running successfully, to make sure that academics are a priority. But one of the things that I think our district really needs to focus on, and things that are not really talked about right now, are what the ramifications of this pandemic are going to have on our children when they all return to school. And I think that that's going to be really important, because mental health is something that we've got to address, and it's got to be at the top of our priority list. And so that's kind of what I bring. I bring 14 years of education experience. That's my job. It's what I do. And I truly believe no community, no matter where you live in Pflugerville, should be disenfranchised. Everybody in Pflugerville should have a voice, no matter what side of 35, no matter what side of 130 you live on. Everybody deserves to have a voice. Everybody should know who their school board members are. And it really shouldn't be a political decision of what community is going to have the most say in what happens in our district. And so that's why I chose to run. I chose to run because education is a priority, but because everybody deserves to have a voice on that school board. So that's a little bit about me. Like I said, I would appreciate your support. It's going to really take all of us to make this happen. And so I appreciate your support. I look forward to answering any questions that you have right now, but you can always reach out to me.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Marc. Oh, shit. Oh, what did the, oh.
Did we have any questions for Marc before we continue?
Yeah, I've got one, and Marc, I don't know that you'll have an answer, and I would understand you're not. But the ISD Pflugerville grade school that's closest to Wells Branch is just across Wells Branch Parkway from us here. It's northwest, I think.
Yes.
And is it a failing school? It's been in really bad shape. Its demographics are, a real problem. It's mostly apartment complexes. So I'm sure kids are moving in and out all the time, and some of the attributes of community and so forth aren't there. They were, before the pandemic, running extra hours of school on a required basis, I think, to try to help the kids catch up, which maybe is helpful, I don't know. what can the board do to help that school? What can volunteers or parents or, people in the neighborhood here do toward helping that kid in school and getting the kids better outcomes?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Craig. Thanks for asking that. Because one of the things that we know, right, is oftentimes in some of our more transient schools, what we want to do, the needs that we need to face first, that we need to address first, right, are the most basic needs, right? Are our kids, our families being supported socially, right, with what's happening at home? And so what we need to make sure is that we have enough social workers to provide resources to families and to guide them to make sure, because what we have seen, right, even in our middle schools and our high schools, is once we support our families, then sometimes our kiddos, we can meet those needs of educating them, but we can't educate kiddos unless their most basic Maslow needs are being met, right? Are we feeding them? Are their needs being met? Do they have a safe place to stay, right? And so I do think that our district really needs to focus on making sure that we have enough social workers in the district, right? And that they're connected to our parent support specialists on our campuses to make sure that that need is met. Once that need is met, then we can begin to address and fill in the gaps, right, of their academics. What can parents do? Oftentimes, there are different organizations like, Watchdog Dads is one that comes to mind right off the bat. And those are adults, those are particularly males that go into our schools and volunteer for once a month, maybe once every other month. And they can serve as mentors. They help out in the classrooms. What we see oftentimes is that we've got lots of moms, not everywhere, but we do have moms. But most often what we need is we need male figures in our schools, particularly in our elementary schools. And once we've connected these dads into schools, and they don't necessarily have to have a child in that school even. But once we've got these dads, chaperoning, even if it's just recess time, right? Or as a lunch monitor, or maybe dads are cutting, right? Cutting things for teachers or whatever it be. Those mentors serve a pivotal role in making sure that our schools are supported. So I think that's something that parents can do. But I will tell you one thing, as someone who is an administrator, administrators always welcome opportunities from parents, from community members, from adults that want to help. There is always a need in so many different capacities. So please reach out. I know they would be so grateful.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Mark, very much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll just, two more quick things. One is my Facebook page is facebook.com, and then Marc, MARC, for PFISD, or my website is marc4pfisd.com. So I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for letting me come in and introduce myself.
Great. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to serve on the board. And thank you for your question, Craig, because that's always been a concern for half of our neighborhood that goes to Northwest, and that we're in a unique, I think, neighborhood because we are so divided in our schools. So thank you very much for that. Our next topic is the Emergency Service District election that's coming up. And at this point, I wanted to turn it over to Josh. And I think oh, there you are. Okay, there you go. And who will then introduce the panel. And then we will have a Q&A after their presentation.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Stubblefield. I'm the president of the Pflugerville Firefighters Association. Also with me today is one of our ESD 2 commissioners, Mike Howell, our assistant chief, Nick Perkins, and then another member representing the association, Trevor Stokes. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to. Also, I'm gonna have to stop my video because my connection is not good. You see my face now. I'm gonna turn it over to Mike Howell to kick things off.
Thanks, Josh. You were slowing down so much there. So, well, I really am appreciative of you all having us here. A little bit about myself. Some of you know that Don and I moved here in the mid '80s here to Wells Branch, and I actually started the neighborhood association, and then was the first elected resident president of the MUD board, and did that for 6 years. And then, quite frankly, what happened was I worked for Austin Water at the time, and of course we were buying and still buy water from Austin Water. And the director of the utilities said, you know, you need to decide whether you get a paycheck or be a politician. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to resign from the MUD board. And at that time, the fire department asked me to come on, see if I would be interested in being part of the ESD. And so I've been doing this for over 20 years now, being part of the ESD. And actually, it's actually more fun because we're so focused on getting the service delivery right. So just a quick background on ESDs. I'm one of 5 commissioners who all live in the district. The entire district covers from well east of Pflugerville all the way over here to Wells Branch. Nick, I think it's about 75 square miles, something like that. We're appointed by the Travis County Commissioners Court. We serve 2-year terms. So every 2 years, we have to get reappointed by the Commissioners Court, and they can certainly choose to not reappoint us. We're a fire district. Travis County ESD Fire number 2 is a fire district that serves that area. And the issue we got into was after a noticeable increase in response times from Austin Travis County EMS back in 2010, we started to notice it was taking longer and longer and longer to get an ambulance to come out here. We decided in 2013 that we wanted to put ambulances into the system on our own, but we wanted to integrate those into Austin Travis County EMS. They would just be based here. And Nick can talk about the operational issues in just a minute, because certainly he's the one in charge of making sure all these happen the right way. But when we actually put ambulances into the system, Austin Travis County, to our surprise, pulled their 2 ambulances out because they needed them in more high volume areas. So that was a big surprise to us, because that was not part of our original plan. And it was, like I said, a surprise. But we were able to, at the time, afford to replace those ambulances and put those in the system. But since then, a combination of things, including, now, first of all, understand, the ESD is limited to a tax cap of 10 cents per $100 valuation, meaning if your house is worth $300,000, that comes out to $300 a month is all we can tax you in property tax. We do have some sales tax. Did I do my math wrong, Donna? So anyway, so do what?
Do you mean 300 a year?
I mean 300 a year, not 300 a month. I'm sorry, 300 a year. Yeah. So we also have some sales tax. Yeah, I know we'd be well off if we could do the other. Maybe it's just dreaming on my part, right? So, but so we're limited on our property tax. So we do have some sales tax that we're able to collect, a half-cent sales tax in this area and other parts of the district. So that helps support the district. But we're operating now fire and EMS on fire department dollars. So recent legislation, not this session, but the session before, also limited entities like ours to even more tax limitations. And Shelley, who's on the Wells Branch MUD, can speak to the issues of how that's affected. So what has happened is that in our projections on our rolling strategic plan, in 2024, we're going to be eating up all of our reserves to continue trying to operate ambulance service at what we are. So in looking at our best options, we looked at 4 options. 1, doing nothing, which we can't do. We have to fix this problem financially. The other is to reduce services, which is to us is like doing nothing. It's eventually going to cause service to decline. The other was to figure out how to get the county and the city of Pflugerville, because Pflugerville, being a separate city, a home rule city, has a particular interest in how they manage this. Get the county and Pflugerville to make up, it's pretty much right now a $6 million shortfall in 2024, or come up with an overlay district, which is what the petitioners went out and petitioned for, and it's now, they went to the county courts, or the county commissioners court approved that, and that's what's on the May ballot. So we decided to let that would be the best option. Now the ESD itself does not advocate, cannot get out and advocate for that. It's an election. That's because it's a voters petition for that. So in that petition drive, which was successful, and Nick will talk about this, what the area is, it's only the area in the Austin ETJ, which is, if you went east along Howard Lane, it would be from around Northtown Mud and further east across over here in the Wells Branch, and a considerable population here in Wells Branch. And that would be the election in May. And Nick, you have a map that'll show that at some point. So why don't I just turn this over to Nick, and if you have operational questions, and Nick can maybe show that map. But the election on May 1 is for the area that's in Austin ETJ. And just as a note, that we're already working with the county to figure out what the best options are in the areas that would be have lesser service. But there's some questions how all that will work. But the first step, obviously, is to see what the outcome of the election would be in May. So, Nick, if you wanted to go ahead and fill in some of the holes there, or Josh, anybody. So, here we go. So.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I think Commissioner Howe summarized the situation pretty well, and I'll just kind of briefly show the area, discuss a little bit of the operational impacts and considerations, and then I think our petitioners may have some comments, and then we're happy to entertain questions at any time. So I think we covered, Commissioner Howe covered these items, and so what we're looking at now is a current map of the district. The red is all of ESD2. That is the area we are currently serving for fire and EMS first response, ALS, and ambulance transport. With the potential creation of ESD 17, this area in, I guess that's a teal, this would become the service area for ESD 17, which includes Wells Branch. If ESD 17 was created, the ambulance and ALS component that we currently provide as ESD 2 would be limited to this area. That funding from ESD 17 would pay for that. So what we'd be looking at is a minimum of at least 3 ambulances and a squad, and the associated overhead with that. And this would be the area. So currently you have an ambulance located here. We have it at our Station 2 in Wells Branch. Our Station 5 located off of Pflugerville Loop also has an ambulance. And then this is a site here in Northtown that we could deploy a unit if we need to. And those are the areas that we would be looking at very quickly to begin redeploying the ambulances to provide and maintain the current standard of cover and response time for that area. We'd have to be looking as Commissioner Howe said, we'd be working with the county on some ways to cover this far east Travis County. So yeah, I just reviewed that. Those are the 2 potential station sites there at Northtown, and then out at our training field far out east to cover that area.
Nick, and there was a question, what was ALS, which I put in was in advanced life support. You might explain what the differences are between.
Yeah, great question. So
yeah.
Currently the fire department provides basic life support first response. So every employee within the district, within ESD2, is a firefighter and an emergency medical technician, and is able to provide basic life support. So this is, basic life-saving skills such as CPR, some limited airway skills, some limited pharmacology and drugs that we're able to administer. And then ALS is advanced life support, and that care is provided by a paramedic. And this includes advanced airway procedures, advanced cardiac defibrillation, advanced pharmacology, and a whole host of other things. Josh, I think, who's on, is actually a paramedic, and so can speak to a lot of the skills that he does. But it's a higher level of service. And what we like to say is we're really able to bring the emergency room to your living room. And that's what ALS is. And so there's a component of that within the first response system, but primarily that is delivered by an ambulance.
Which is what we're doing now. We do ALS now with our current system.
Yeah. So I think that kind of covers our side of the presentation. I think we want to move over to Josh and Trevor, or we're happy to answer questions and have a discussion wherever you guys want to go with this.
Does it raise our property, not our property, does it raise our sales tax, or do we continue to do the 8.25%?
Wait a minute, hold on. Oh, Craig, hold on just a minute. Hold that question a minute.
Okay.
Josh, do you want to talk a little bit more about ED 17, or
Yes, I was going to
before we get into questions?
Yes, Susan, I was going to have Trevor jump
Okay.
on and let
All right.
him. He had some stuff to add.
Hey everybody, my name is Trevor Stokes. I've worked with ESD number 2 for almost 20 years. The majority of my time there in Wells Branch at Bratton and Shoreline. And so what's interesting, I first and foremost want to thank y'all for your support up to this point. I enjoy working in Wells Branch. When I first moved to Austin in '86, I was 6 years old. We spent the majority of our time looking at houses in Wells Branch. And then we ended up moving out to Leander. So it's interesting for me now. I serve that area. I actually go by the houses that we looked at and almost bought. And I almost would have been a Wells Branch resident. And for some of you, that might have been a bad thing, because I would have been that little kid cruising around causing all kinds of problems. But now, hopefully, it's a good thing that I serve that area. I want to thank y'all mainly because in 2012, 2013, I spearheaded the overlay. And Wells Branch was extremely supportive of that. As a matter of fact, we made it all the way to the court to get it put on the election in large part because of the support of Wells Branch. It is very hard sometimes. I think the fire department, you see Pflugerville on the side of the fire trucks, and people a lot of times forget about Wells Branch. They forget about Northtown. And I know it pains Commissioner Howe's ears to hear that, but the point is, we are your fire department, no different than we are the fire department of Pflugerville. And so we're very careful and very concerned about what the long-term future of the fire department looks like, because, there's been comments from the city of Pflugerville that they want to take over the fire department. And I don't know what that means for Wells Branch and for Northtown. And I can tell you that Josh is committed as a union president. I was committed as a former union president. That whatever ends up happening with the future of the Pflugerville Fire Department and ESD number 2, Wells Branch and Northtown will not be left out in the cold. So to kind of circle back around and kind of hit a couple of things to make sure that everyone understands kind of where we're at. Back in 2012, 2013, there was only 2 ambulances available within the district. One of those was at the Pflugerville Parkway, and the other one was out on the far east side of the city. 50% of the time, there was no advanced life support available for the district. So that's a flip of the coin. And for some of you, it may be kind of abstract because you've maybe never called 911, but for others, it's a pretty big deal. When you have a heart attack, a flip of the coin is unacceptable. So the fire chief back then knew that was a problem, and very much started looking at what were the options, as Commissioner Howe kind of talked about. Fast forward, we kind of looked at some different things to fund that, because as has already been mentioned, ESD2 funds the fire mission. What we were able to do was to come up with this overlay, and unfortunately, 2012, 2013, because of some political resistance, we were unable to move forward with that. This problem still exists, and now today, here we are again, looking at creating an overlay to fund the ALS mission. This ALS mission is kind of a big deal in the sense that it is what ultimately it has the ability to save lives versus some of the other services that we do that are geared more towards property. Today, you have 5 ambulances available within the district. So it's not a flip of the coin anymore. We meet all of the national response metrics, and as a matter of fact, we exceed most of those. So the need to financially secure the future of ALS service within ESD2 and now hopefully ESD 17 is one that I'm super passionate about. And as you know, the President Stubblefield, he's also a paramedic too. The differences between the services that you used to have is we can do it for half the cost. So our ambulances are staffed with a paramedic and usually a basic, and both are firefighters. So for half the cost, you get twice as many ambulances with a firefighting capability. So to me, I think that's a pretty good value. Ultimately, we're here to kind of answer any questions, but the big thing I want to make sure of is that we as association members, as employees of ESD2, we're going to make sure that the Wells Branch area, the Northtown area, the unincorporated areas of the city of Austin will remain served and will meet and exceed the national standards that we have to follow.
All right. All right, thank you. No, Craig, I'm sorry I cut you off, but Craig, if you want to answer, if you want to ask a question.
Okay. Yeah, I think sales tax is capped at 8.25%, but you're talking about sort of dipping somewhat into that fund. It doesn't change the sales tax that people pay in the area, right?
That's correct. There is no sales tax room left in this area.
Yeah.
So the ESD 17, if the voters approve it, would be a property tax only. And the estimate right now, and Nick, you can probably speak to this a little bit better because this number fluctuates. It's somewhere that the ESD would probably set a tax rate around 6 cents, maybe 7 cents, which would be roughly on the house here in Wells Branch, $13 to $15 a month for that. And that would be throughout the, obviously the area we're talking about, but there is no sales tax room left. It is 8.25, and all that's used up by various entities, including the library district. The library district has part of that too. So.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions is that we know that there is more growth in the EDS2, our district, and even in the area that is voting for EDS 17 outside of Pflugerville. Even with that growth and the increase in property values, that would not give you the funding that you would need to go forward. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's a great question. And the example we've used, though it's not here in Wells Branch, but the example we've used is the Amazon facility being put in over on the east side of Pflugerville. And Nick, you've got the numbers off the top of your head. What's that valued at by the
350,000. 300. That's what it would bring the district. And so the topic of growth, that we get that a lot. And so I think when we use a commercial example like Commissioner Howe is mentioning, so Amazon is going to bring $350,000 in property revenue for the district. That doesn't quite cover half the cost of an ambulance. What Amazon's going to bring, what Amazon is also going to bring, is 1,000 employees, traffic, and call volume. And so while we are incredibly supportive of commercial development, please don't misunderstand me. I think there is got to be an understanding or an appreciation for when we bring something into the community, it creates a need for services and a demand for services for an already strapped emergency system. And so the way the Northeast Travis County area has kind of developed is we've only recently began to see the commercial development. What we have been seeing for years is rooftop, is residential development. And unfortunately, you know, and I'm a taxpayer too, I live in the area, is very hard to provide high level emergency services on that revenue. And so while we do see the growth, and it is coming, it is happening, it's not dollar for dollar matched with what it costs to deliver emergency services based on the demand that's created. I think that math maybe works in some examples, but it really doesn't work in emergency services. And when you look at our call demand and the effect to our response times, you kind of see that it's not one for one. It's an exponential kind of cascading effect. So we are seeing growth, but also with Senate Bill 2 is, you know, that 3.5 cents is limit to existing property. There's not a limit on new property. And so a lot of people will say that as well. The problem is, as an ESD, we are limited at 10 cents. So Commissioner Howe is living with this every year, and it is boggling our minds. But because of that limit with Senate Bill 2 on the existing property, we're actually having trouble hitting our 10 cents. So, and that's part of that forecast, that we're actually going to see a decline in our ability to maximize the 10-cent cap on its own. So it's quite complicated, and there's a lot of factors. But you know, when people simply say, "Shouldn't growth pay for it?" I agree with you. Growth should pay for it. But it doesn't necessarily work that way because a lot of factors that are involved with what comes with growth.
And if I could just go back and add to that as I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, I live right off Bratton Lane, up here, Grand Avenue Parkway in Bratton Lane, now that that's going through. That intersection is going to be a somewhat dangerous intersection, even with the traffic light. You know, the volume of truck traffic that we're seeing on Bratton Lane and everything else, even though it may move around and come through down the new portion of Grand Avenue Parkway, it is that growth brings its own set of problems, you know, around Vista Business Park and all the trucks. But as Nick pointed out, and Shelley would understand too, that housetops, rooftops do not pay for themselves when you're at that limit of $300 a year, because those are your volumes of calls. I mean, you've got a family of, you know, 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 people. And, you know, whether it's a kid who falls down and skins his knee, or somebody who's having a heart attack, you dial 911 and the apparatus is coming to see you. So there's here in Wells Branch alone, not including the new growth to the north of us, there's what, 2,800 houses. Shelley, isn't that about right? So, you know, that's a lot of potential call that really doesn't pay for itself over the course of time. So city planners will always tell you rooftops don't pay. That's why they want to attract commercial development. But commercial development also drags in the potential of more calls coming. So it's this constant battle of chasing after growth in hopes that you somehow can maintain the budget. And now to the legislature with SB 2, as Nick was talking about in the last session, limited our ability. It's extremely difficult to stay where we are. That's kind of what's put us in the bind. So,
Larry, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. The funding itself, we use generic terms. It pays for ambulance service. It pays for firemen. More precisely, what will that funding pay for? Does it pay for the buildings where the people stay? Does it pay their salaries? Does it pay for their food? I mean, I just need some education on what precisely the funding pays for.
Yeah, great question. So what ESD 17 would provide funding for is 2 things. It would provide direct funding for ambulances. So we're running ambulances for $650,000. That's a direct cost of an ambulance, the equipment, and 2 staff positions, including 1 being a paramedic. And that's an ambulance cost. The other thing that it addresses is some of the cost allocation that the ESD has absorbed and invested in over the last several years to build capacity for an EMS system. That's going to include buildings, retrofits to the buildings to house staff, our medical director, our training. When you bring ambulances into a fire department, it impacts nearly every part of the fire department. So to answer your question, it's primarily going to fund the direct costs of the ambulance, and then there's some allocation for the capital impacts into the other programs that are impacted by the department.
Okay, and somebody mentioned response time goals. Does anybody tell them? Can someone tell me what those goals are?
Right. So in Travis County, the established response time goal is to get an ambulance to a priority 1 call. So priority 1, we designate generally 5 priorities to a medical call. Priority 1 being the most severe. This person is on their way out, and so priority 1 and 2. So the goal for that is to get an ambulance there within 12 minutes, under 12 minutes. And so we're able to do that 90% of the time. When we look at our aggregate performance, we're at about 12 minutes and 49 seconds. And that aggregate time is growing because of the increase in population, the demand, but we're still hanging on to that 90% performance for priority 1 calls. And we're one of the few agencies in the county that's able to do that.
Okay, hey, thank you.
Rhonda, you have a question, Rhonda? Oh, you're.
Yes. Give me time. I'm an old lady. Mike, unfortunately, you confused me numerous times, and so I've got to get things straight in my head. You said that average of this 10 cents for property tax that we're currently paying for ESD2 is about $300 per year, correct? Okay, then you said that if we implement ESD 17, it would increase our property taxes $13 to $15 a month.
Correct. ESD
All right,
17.
so that means that it would increase our property taxes by $156 to $180 per year. So we would be paying for ESD 2 and 17 by at least $450 a year for property taxes. All right, so now the next thing that I need to understand is, I believe it was Nick, maybe not, maybe it was someone else, who said that we currently have 5 ambulances in effect right now. Is that true? Okay, and each one of those is currently costing or budgeted at $650,000 a year. Is that right? Okay.
That's for the cost of the unit itself.
But that includes people, and it includes supplies, and it includes gas and tires and all of that stuff, correct? No?
Correct. What it doesn't include is what I was explaining to Mr. Williams, is the cost allocation for housing. So the fire station that we keep the ambulance in.
But it's talking salaries. That $650,000 a year has to be including salaries.
Yes,
and that's an EMT tech, an EMT, and a basic, I believe was the terminology. Yes, okay. So my question, after getting all of that straightened out, is how many more ambulances will be put into service? And will those ambulances be used as a backup for the existing 5?
So what will happen is if ESD 17 is created, that map I showed you of the entire ESD, we will not have to provide ambulance service for that area. We will only provide ambulance service for that area that's in the teal. And so based on the analysis, the call volume and the deployment needed to meet that response time, we would really only need 3 ambulances for
the area in teal.
Correct.
Right? And right now you have 2 ambulances in that area with a 3rd station coming on board.
With the creation of ESD 17, yes, the Northtown site could be put into service. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I noticed on your map that there were 2 red blocks in the Pflugerville area. Maybe if you want to put your map back up there. My question is, where the currently 2 ambulances are sitting, in the proposed ESD 17 area. Will those 2 ambulances move over to the east to cover those 2 red blocks, those 2 new stations?
So currently, we would, based on the current call data and the analysis, we would only need 1 ambulance over in this area.
But that's not part of the ESD 17. That's currently ESD 2, correct?
Correct. But this part, this little teal area up here would be part of 17. And when Commissioner Howe said that we're talking with the county, we're talking about how to better serve this part of the county and then beyond into Northeast Travis County. And that would have to be through a fee for service or a contract or an ILA of some sort.
An interlocal agreement. ILA is interlocal agreement. One government contracting with another, meaning the county, coming back in and contracting with us to provide that service to the east side of the district that is not covered in the teal. So those things are still in discussion, but so much is dependent on the outcome of the election that they can only go so far, and they're simply proposals on the table to see what happens. So.
Okay, so with the 3 new units coming on board, those 3 units would also be budgeted at that $650,000 per year?
Yes, ma'am. And then there's
Okay.
an allocation cost for the capital items.
Okay. Thank you. You answered my questions and it cleared up a lot of things for me.
And I'm sorry I confused you.
It's easy to do. It's easy to do, Mike.
To piggyback on Rhonda's, how do you foresee going forward providing services in only those areas that voted, only in the teal, and then having to deal with Pflugerville, who is not part of this election? So how do you see it happening in the future?
That's the $1 million question. And obviously, from an operational standpoint, it does create a little bit of a challenge. If ESD 17 is created, it actually becomes fairly simple. It's a more finite area for us to cover. We already have the ability to put resources there fairly quickly. But I don't have the $1 million question is, how do we see that going? We believe, like Commissioner Howe said, because we've already had a lot of these talks with county officials, that we'll be able to reach some sort of agreement with a fee for service that appropriately captures the necessary costs for the county. But the city of Pflugerville, without a crystal ball, it would be very difficult for me to speak for them and to know where they're going. To date, we don't really know what their plan is. So we do know what the county thinks about this, and we do understand where they're going. But we really don't know where the city of Pflugerville is going with their plans.
Okay.
And that is actually the only answer we have at this point. We're in conversations with the county because they want to make sure there's best outcomes for the area that they directly serve. But the city of Pflugerville's being a home rule city, they're making their own decision, and none of us have the ability to influence that. That'll be up to them. So.
Right. Any other questions?
I have a kind of just a comment. When I was on the mud board, I'm someone who moved out here and bought my first home in Wells Branch in the 80s, and I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere. And I know so many other people. Back in 1980, I never thought I'd need an ambulance. And now I'm a hike. And I watch so many other people who have stayed here. So I really do care about this because I do think there's going to be a need in Wells Branch. That's all.
Well, there are a lot more questions that we could ask, because there's a lot more about where exactly the funding will go, what will it support kind of going forward, especially in like, how do you distinguish what fund you use to pay for the house? Let's say the fire station. You're going to have 2 separate funds. You have a EDS 2 and an EDS 17. does that become a problem kind of?
Yeah, so it is from a tactical perspective on how the finances work. There is some intricacy there, but as Commissioner Howe maintains, all of our books are open. We submit. We are required by law to submit financial audits, and what you'd see is a creation of two separate boards that would work together to provide the service. And that would be done in a very transparent way, the same way that your MUD operates. A lot of our operating procedures look very similar to the MUD in terms of government. And so, but to put it in simple terms, is there's direct costs for an ambulance, and then there's allocation costs for things like capital and the program impacts to the rest of the fire department. And we have that data to show what that looks like. Because like I said, when a fire department takes on the responsibility of providing ambulances, it impacts everything. And so, I think a point that kind of gets lost when we present is we are a fire department providing fire and EMS service on an ESD tax structure, which was meant for rural volunteer fire departments. And here we are serving almost 140,000 people out of one budget. And we do get sales tax, so, I want to make sure that that's understood too. But even with our current property tax and our sales tax, we are well below what a traditional municipal fire-only department needs to adequately to provide resources. So, we've been able to operate, this way for a long time. Commissioner Howe can tell you stories about the history of the district with the challenges we've faced. The Wells Branch MUD had to fix one of our fire trucks one time. Those days are, and that was in my lifetime. So this wasn't 100 years ago. So that's what this is about. This is about adequately funding a fire department and EMS service in a growing area that, 20, 30 years ago, we were able to squeak by with what we were given. We're very challenged today trying to meet and maintain a high level of service to folks in Northeast Travis County.
Where can we find, now, Mike, where can we find that information on your ESD allocation, your spending and that financial information? Where's the best place to find that information? If we
actually on our ESD2 website, there's quite a bit of information. I'm old school and it drives Nick crazy because I print everything out, but there's a substantial document that outlines the entire thing right here. It's on the ESD2 website. I think it's available right off the front page, but it gets into charts and graphs and everything else that there you go, Nick. The thing I wanted to mention too, that while Nick's bringing that up, is that the level of service that we deliver for the limited amount of taxing ability we have, we actually did this survey statewide. And then I used to work for the city of Austin, and you'll see allocations of funds of, for example, in the city of Austin, of anywhere from 23 to 27 cents to a fire and EMS, whereas we've been doing it for 10 cents. And one of the things about being capped is you become damned efficient at what you do, okay? And it really is remarkable what this fire department's done over the years as far as stretching dollars. And the other thing we don't do, which some people think we should, we do not go into massive long-term debt that spreads things out, because so many of our assets are not long life assets. A fire truck may last 10 years. An ambulance may be what, Nick, 7 before you have to do a rebuild. And by the way, we're in the middle of rebuilding fire trucks right now because we think it's more cost efficient than buying a new ones. We've got to think a couple of them are looking into that right now. But we've been forced to be amazingly efficient with what we do. And still, just so you know, this department was just named one of the top fire departments in the country, ISO 3, it's either the Apple software or it's ISO 3, which is the emergency or the insurance industry's allocation. We are number one. There are what in Texas out of 3,000 something departments, or how many are ISO 1, Nick?
Well,
Or actually-
across the country,
Across the
there's
country, right.
49,000 fire departments rated, and there's about 400 of them that have the ISO 1 rating. And so I would suggest if we haven't covered it, that you contact your insurance company and let them know that that goes into effect April 1. Not all insurance companies will give you a benefit of that. And granted, I don't want to offend if there's any insurance agents on the call here, but I would pursue an insurance company that recognizes that. I know there's some big firms that don't, but my insurance does recognize it. So, I got a 10% discount. So I think that you should pursue that. And then for our commercial folks, those carriers do follow ISO. So it's a big impact for the economic development, the commercial folks as well. But definitely reach out to your insurance agent, and I would pressure them to give you a discount.
But the importance of that is that they did a full analysis of the operation of the department, from operational to finance and everything else. And that's just now happening, that after many years of trying to chase this number 1 rating, it's there. And that's a significant success on the firefighters and the entire operation to make that happen. So what I'm really speaking of is the efficiency and the best use of dollars that I don't think people realize that what people really want is, I've said this for many years, when you dial 1 or dial 9, you want the truck leaving the station. When you dial that second one, you want them in front of your house. And when you dial that last one, you want them pounding on your chest or putting the fire out. And that's how important it is, when the worst moment of your life, that somebody comes in, takes you outside, and they run in to solve the problem. That's significant. And that's how people think about this. And that's what we want to continue to keep delivering. It's just as Donna said, who would ever thought we'd really care about an ambulance until you get older and think about it? You just really want that ambulance and close by. So I'm sorry, I get really passionate about this. That's why I like doing it.
I have just one more question. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, Craig.
It's quick. Does it change how first responder is handled with the ambulance district being separate from the fire? Or do you still get a fire truck and an ambulance dispatched?
Yes, sir. You'll still receive, ESD 17 would still receive, that would not change. And in fact, based on how this kind of shakes out with the other part of the district, there would be more paramedics on fire trucks. So you would see ALS showing up with the fire trucks that get there faster than the ambulances. Based on how this shakes out in the rest of the district, we would potentially be looking at reducing some of that BOS service in the other parts outside of ESD 17. But for this area, no.
Would this funding cover pensions and looking at doing some kind of pension, I guess, development for your personnel?
So the firefighters already have a defined benefits plan. They work under a contract through collective bargaining. And all of this is factored into our costs. But to say that this is going to directly provide some new thing, that's not true. We've had a defined benefits plan for 10 years, Trevor. But I think to understand again that when we associate costs, so for salaries, it includes the Association for Retirement and Benefits as part of that package.
And I wanted to point out too, that when we're talking about the allocation of funds and what the complexities of it, we're already allocating funds on our books. We know what EMS is costing already. We know what the fire side is costing. So we're already doing those cost allocations, so that if ESD 17 is created, it's going to add some complexity, but it's not something we're not familiar with.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I appreciate you being here today. I know this is an important issue for our community. and helping to get people out to vote on May 1st. Just continuing to practice our voting muscle here that we need to do in our neighborhood. We need to get this word out to folks that we've got.
Just one other comment.
Okay.
I just wrote
Larry?
my home insurance carrier and told them about the rating. So we'll see if that helps.
Yay, okay. All
I
right.
appreciate that.
Thank you all for the
Thank
time
you
and
for-
thanks for the great questions too. So,
Yeah, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in touch. Or no, we'll have to get the information out.
Okay. Bye-bye.
yes, please do. Absolutely. So.
Y'all take care. Have a good weekend.
Yeah,
Thank you all very much.
You too.